My name is Vorruk Sel, third-tier strategic analyst for the Galactic Hegemony Fleet Command, and I will tell you something that took me 43 rotations of professional humiliation to finally accept. I was wrong about humans. Not slightly wrong. Not wrong in a minor, forgivable, "oh excuse me I misspoke" kind of way. I was catastrophically, embarrassingly, cosmically wrong. The kind of wrong that gets carved onto your professional obituary. The kind of wrong that your subordinates whisper about at social gatherings while trying very hard not to laugh directly into your face. Allow me to explain. The year was 2031 by human reckoning. The Hegemony had been observing the Terran species for approximately 60 of their years at that point. 60 years of watching them burn fossil fuels, argue on their communication networks, and somehow still maintain 17 competing fast food corporations despite also developing faster-than-light theory. Priorities, as humans say. We were not impressed. Our official classification of humanity was Category 3, Tier 2, meaning technologically adolescent, militarily manageable, culturally loud, the kind of species that sends a probe into the outer solar system with a golden record attached to it, as if hostile aliens would receive it and think, "Oh lovely. They enjoy Chuck Berry, let us not destroy them." Our standing directive was simple. Monitor, contain, do not make contact until they developed at least basic energy shielding, or stopped using petroleum-based plastics. Whichever came first. What none of us expected was Lieutenant Commander Dayo Osei. Dayo Osei was not the highest-ranking human officer at the time of first contact. He was not even the most decorated. He held a mid-level posting aboard the UES Resolute, a human warship that, by our measurements, had the defensive capability of a slightly angry weather satellite. What Dayo Osei had, apparently, was something humans call vision. I did not understand what that meant for a very long time. In the Hegemony, vision is assigned. You receive your function, your strategic directive, your operational parameters, and you execute them with precision. The idea that a third-tier officer might look beyond his assignment, beyond his rank, beyond the walls of his own clearance level, and simply decide that things should be different, that concept did not fit neatly into any of my analytical frameworks. So I dismissed him. That was mistake number one. We made first contact on a Tuesday. Humans attach significance to days of the week, though I have never fully understood why. Tuesday seemed, to them, a particularly uninspiring choice. One of our scout vessels, a small reconnaissance craft commanded by Sub-Overseer Dreth Pollen, suffered a navigational failure and drifted into the outer edge of the Terran detection grid. The humans scrambled 4 warships. We watched from a distance, calm and analytical, certain this would be a minor diplomatic incident. The Resolute arrived last of the 4 ships. Dayo Osei was not even the commanding officer on scene. Admiral Vera Tate held that position. She was impressive by human standards. Tall, precise, the kind of decorated officer whose uniform barely had room for another ribbon. Admiral Tate opened communications with Sub-Overseer Dreth Pollen in a tone that was measured, professional, and textbook correct. Dreth Pollen, who had never spoken to a human before and was also quite panicked, responded with what our translators described as a non-standard frequency burst containing 42 simultaneous warnings across every Hegemony emergency protocol band. In simpler terms, he accidentally told every human ship within range that they were all about to be vaporized. The 3 other ships immediately began evasive maneuvers. Admiral Tate's composure fractured. For exactly 1.3 seconds, the entire first contact situation teetered on the edge of a very preventable war. Then Dayo Osei's voice came through on a secondary channel. He said, and I will quote this precisely because my analysts replayed it 400 times, "Ma'am, that's a distress signal layered over a standard weapons lock warning protocol. He's scared of us. He's not threatening us. He's asking for help." Admiral Tate paused. 11 seconds of silence that felt, even from our observation post, like an entire historical era compressing itself into a single breath. Then she said, "Stand down. All ships, stand down." Dreth Pollen did not get vaporized that Tuesday. He received repairs, a translated diplomatic packet, and a very confused debrief session. The Hegemony High Council convened an emergency session. 17 different committees were established to analyze what had occurred. 92 official reports were filed. I wrote 4 of them myself. In none of them did I mention Dayo Osei by name. He was referenced as a junior tactical officer, present at the incident, contribution categorized as situational interpretation. I gave credit to Admiral Tate's command decision. I gave credit to our own monitoring teams for providing real-time translation support. I gave credit to Sub-Overseer Dreth Paulin for, and I quote my own report here, remaining non-aggressive despite equipment failure. What I did not do was look at a lieutenant commander on a third-tier warship and think, that person just changed the direction of interspecies history. That was mistake number 2. Over the next 2 years, formal communication protocols were established between the Hegemony and Earth. It was slow. It was bureaucratic. At one point, 3 separate Hegemony delegations were kept waiting for 40 days because the Human Diplomatic Corps accidentally scheduled all their meetings on a holiday called Thanksgiving, and apparently this required everyone to travel to see their families and eat a specific bird. We found this baffling. We still find this baffling, but the talks progressed. Humanity was elevated to Category 2, Tier 1, a remarkable jump, unprecedented in Hegemony classification history. Our analysts attributed this to their surprisingly rapid military development, their unusual collaborative nature under pressure, and what one of my colleagues described as their disturbing enthusiasm for solving problems no one asked them to solve. What I continued to not attribute it to was Dayo Osei, who had by this point been promoted to full commander, assigned to the Joint Hegemony Terran Liaison Division, and was quietly, consistently, completely without any authorization I was aware of, rewriting every single assumption we had about how species relations should function. I say quietly. I mean it in the strictest sense. He never raised his voice in meetings. He never demanded recognition. He had this particular habit of sitting at the far end of conference tables, asking one question at the end of long discussions, and then watching while the entire room slowly realized the question had dismantled everything they had just agreed upon. It was infuriating. It was also, I was beginning to suspect, very deliberate. The moment I truly began paying attention came during the Kelvar system negotiation of 2033. A disputed resource corridor. 3 species with overlapping territorial claims, 2 of them armed and one of them the Muvari collective, with a historical grievance against the Hegemony dating back roughly 200 years that we had, administratively speaking, forgotten to resolve. Standard Hegemony procedure was to deploy a senior diplomatic envoy, assign arbitration parameters, and allow the process to reach its predetermined conclusion over the course of 18 to 24 months. Neat, orderly, occasionally somewhat unjust, but efficient. Commander Dayo Osei was included in the Terran delegation as a junior advisory member. He had no formal authority. He had no voting status. He was there, technically, as an observer. He observed for exactly 6 days. On day 7 he submitted an informal proposal. No official headers, no diplomatic formatting, just a document addressed personally to the lead representatives of all 3 species, written in their individual languages, not translated by committee but personally constructed with what later analysis revealed was an almost perfect cultural register match for each recipient. The proposal did not divide the resource corridor. It did not assign arbitration timelines. It outlined, in precise and understated detail, exactly how all 3 species had been administratively disadvantaged by the same hegemony procedural error from the same committee ruling 198 years ago. And it suggested, politely, that correcting that error would resolve the current dispute entirely, while also addressing 17 other territorial complaints that had been sitting in hegemony administrative backlog for an average of 60 years. The senior diplomatic envoy was furious. The 3 disputing species signed a joint cooperation agreement within 9 days. I requested Commander Dayo Osei's full personnel file that afternoon. I read it twice. And for the first time in my career, I wrote in my personal log 4 words I had never written before. I missed something important. I missed something important. 4 words. Written in my private log at the end of a very long evening, with a cup of cold Hegemony standard issue nutrient broth sitting untouched beside my terminal. I stared at those 4 words for a long time. Then I closed the log, filed Commander Osei's personnel file under active monitoring, and told myself I was simply being thorough. I was not being thorough. I was, for the first time in 43 rotations of service, genuinely unsettled. Let me tell you what the Hegemony does when it becomes unsettled by something. We study it. We classify it. We assign it a category number and a tier ranking and a committee, and then we watch it from a very safe analytical distance until we feel we understand it well enough to stop being unsettled by it. What we do not do is promote it. Commander Dayo Osei had been in the Joint Liaison Division for 2 years at this point. His performance reviews were, technically, excellent. His superiors described him with phrases like demonstrates unconventional initiative and exhibits non-standard problem resolution approaches. In hegemony administrative language, this translates roughly to, We are not sure what he is doing, but it keeps working and that makes us uncomfortable. He had been passed over for promotion twice. I checked the records. Both times the review board cited insufficient adherence to established procedural frameworks. Both times a more senior officer with a flawless compliance record received the posting instead. Both times the more senior officer produced results that were perfectly adequate. Adequate. That word sat in the reports like a polite apology. Meanwhile, Dayo Osei, without a promotion, without expanded authority, without anyone formally asking him to, had quietly resolved 4 interspecies disputes, restructured the Hegemony Terran Communication Protocol Index to reduce translation errors by 61%, and personally convinced a minor species delegation that had been refusing Hegemony contact for 30 years to attend a single preliminary meeting. They came to that meeting because he had spent 3 months learning 17 words of their language and used every single one of them in his opening statement. 17 words. That was all it took. I sat with that fact for a very long time. The crisis came in late 2034. I will not pretend I saw it coming, because I did not. No one did. Which was itself a failure of imagination that I find embarrassing to admit. A faction within the Hegemony High Council, the Restrictionist Bloc, had been growing quietly influential for several years. Their position was simple and, on the surface, logical. Humanity was advancing too quickly. Their integration into hegemony diplomatic structures was proceeding faster than protocols allowed. Their officers, specifically certain officers, were operating with an influence that exceeded their formal rank classifications. They named Dayo Osei in the proposal. Not as a threat, they were too careful for that. They named him as an example of procedural irregularity, an anomaly requiring correction. They proposed a formal review of all Terran advisory personnel currently embedded in hegemony-adjacent divisions. They proposed stricter rank-to-authority correlation enforcement. They proposed in language so bureaucratic it almost had its own sedative effect, that Commander Osei be reassigned to a monitoring post in the outer communication relay stations. An outer relay station. For a man who had prevented 3 wars with a document he wrote on his own time. I received the proposal for review because my division handled interspecies personnel classifications. I was supposed to provide an analytical assessment within 10 days. I was supposed to be objective. I sat at my terminal on day 1 and read the proposal 4 times. On day 2 I called my supervisor, Arch-Analyst Vorruk Sel, and told him I needed more time. He asked why. I told him the data was complex. The data was not complex. The politics were. Dayo Osei requested a meeting with me on day 4. I do not know how he found out about the proposal. I did not ask, because in my experience, asking Dayo Osei how he knows things leads to answers that make your own intelligence apparatus feel slightly inadequate. He arrived at my office on time. Exactly on time. Not the aggressive kind of early that says I am important. Not the strategic kind of late that says I am busy. Precisely on time. I noticed that and filed it away as another example of a man who understood exactly what every single choice communicated. He sat down across from me without being invited to. Another choice. He said, "You are going to approve the reassignment." I said, "I have not made a determination." He said, "You are going to approve it because the political cost of rejecting it is higher than you want to pay right now, and I want you to know that I understand that. I am not here to change your mind." I stared at him. In 30 years of diplomatic and analytical work, I had never had a subject of review sit across from me and accurately narrate my own internal reasoning back to me in under 30 seconds. I said, "Then why are you here?" He leaned forward slightly. Not aggressively, the way someone leans forward when they want to make sure the next thing they say lands exactly right. He said, "Because in 6 months the Muvari collective is going to request full hegemony membership, and when they do, the Restrictionist bloc is going to oppose it using procedural grounds. And when that happens, the council is going to need someone who speaks 17 words of Muvari, and knows which 17 words matter most." He paused. "I just want to make sure someone in this building remembers that." He stood up, thanked me for my time and left. I sat in my office for a very long while after that. The nutrient broth went cold again. I have a habit apparently. I approved the reassignment. I have thought about that decision more than any other in my career. I approved it because Dayo Osei was right. The political cost was real. The Restrictionist bloc had enough council votes to create serious structural problems if I refused. The reassignment was temporary, technically. Outer relay postings had a standard review period of 18 months. I told myself 18 months was manageable. I told myself a great many things that season. The Muvari collective submitted their membership application 5 months and 22 days later. Exactly as Dayo Osei had said they would. The Restrictionist Bloc opposed it on procedural grounds, exactly as he had said they would. The council convened in emergency session. 17 committees were proposed. 91 reports were requested. Standard hegemony machinery grinding forward at its magnificent catastrophic pace. And in the outer relay station 3 systems away, Commander Dayo Osei was monitoring communication frequencies and filing shift reports that nobody read. I requested his immediate recall on the 3rd day of the council session. I filed it under critical specialist redeployment, a classification that bypassed standard review timelines. Arch-analyst Brivik Toon called me within the hour and told me I was being politically reckless. I told him I was being thorough. He said the Restrictionist Bloc would not like it. I told him the Muvari collective would not wait. Dayo Osei arrived at council headquarters 2 days later. He walked into the session as a commander, with no expanded authority, no new title, no additional rank. He sat at the far end of the table, which I had begun to understand was simply where he chose to sit, and he waited. He spoke once. Near the end of a 4-hour session that had produced nothing but procedural fatigue and 3 new subcommittees, he said 12 words in Muvari. Perfect register, perfect weight. The Muvari delegation representative, who had been professionally stone-faced for 4 hours, looked at him for a long moment. Then she said in standard hegemony common tongue, for the first time in the entire session, "We are willing to continue discussion." 12 words. That was all it took. The Muvari collective was formally admitted to the hegemony 11 months later. It remains the fastest membership ratification in our recorded history. Dayo Osei was promoted to admiral the following year, quietly, without ceremony, which I was told was his specific request. He continued sitting at the far end of tables. He continued asking one question near the end of long discussions. He continued being, technically, the most dangerous person in any room he entered. And I, Vorruk Sel, 3rd-tier strategic analyst, who had spent 2 years watching him without truly seeing him, wrote my final official assessment of the man who had changed everything without ever raising his voice. I wrote one sentence: position measures authority, vision measures impact. Commander Osei had neither the position nor the patience to wait for permission. And because of that we are all still here. I stand by every word, even the parts that are an admission of my own failure, especially those parts.